Since his 1990 breakthrough with Slacker, Richard Linklater has been a constant in so many people's cinematic lives. His work is often philosophical, it's witty, emotionally and intellectually intelligent, and it's hugely entertaining, no matter the subject. And that subject has ranged from the musings of residents in Austin, Texas, the highs and lows of high school and college, killers with a heart of gold, journalists posing as killers, and there's also an undercover cop who's pursuing himself. Then we have the 12-year journey of a young boy through to adulthood, the 20-year and counting chronicle of a personal relationship, and a musician who's posing as a teacher who brings out the rock instincts in his pupils. To date, he has directed 24 features and many shorts, documentaries, and TV programs. And if I had to pick one word that, for me, summed up the cinema of Richard Linklater, it's joyous, and nowhere is that more evident than in his most recent film, Nouvelle Vague, which is an account of the making of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. And before I welcome our guest to the stage, we're going to see a clip from about 20 minutes into the film, and it's when the veteran Italian director, Roberto Rossellini, visits the offices of the august French film journal, Cahiers du Cinéma, and is introduced to all the staff by Francois Truffaut. Can you please show the clip?
Thank you for being here. Oh, by the way, the Italians really don't like that. They say Roberto Rossellini would never steal sandwiches. I'm like, it's his reception. They're his sandwiches.
So, Nouvelle Vague isn't the only film that you have here in the festival. You also have Blue Moon, which we'll come to in a short while.
Sure.
When did you first see Godard's film?
Oh, wow. I was in my early 20s, just getting interested in cinema. I wish I had a great story, like it changed my life or something, but I didn't really understand it very much the first time I saw it. I saw it a few months later for the second time, and I think I'd read a book on the New Wave, so I started to kind of get and I felt the freedom of it, actually. I felt like, oh, okay, this is what was so different, but it took me a while.
So from that point of gradually appreciating the film,
yeah,
to deciding to do this film.
Oh, well, I've seen that film a lot over the years, but it was the rest of the Nouvelle Vague that got me excited too, as well. I think that's why I called it, Nouvelle Vague, because it's about a community, That's what I think is so important for cinema, that films don't just spring out of nowhere. Every filmmaker, even if it's you and your handful of friends making the film, that's a community. You love films, and I wanted to kind of show how it comes out of that kind of cinephiles get together and get excited, and someone has a camera and you make a movie. It's kind of great.
So what was the experience like of making this film on the streets of Paris?
Oh, it was exhilarating. It was crazy. It was very different than, obviously where they could show up and just shoot and not even have a permit, famously, they didn't have an art department, sound department, locations department, no hair, makeup. No, it was almost a student film, a Boudoussif, but we had to design, and we were at a lot of the original locations, but it's 64 years later, and Paris is pretty well preserved, but the first floor is always commercial and different, so we had to just design everything. It was in a lot of visual effects, subtly. I don't want it to feel that way. I want the film to feel. This film is, I told everybody working on it, like, this is a film made in 1959. We found in an attic somewhere. It's like, it's from that time, which that doesn't usually work in cinema, But I was like, at this time it might. That was such a distinct look and feel. And I said, this film wasn't made by Godard. It was made by, I always say, Jacques Rogier, who was friends with Godard. And I said, yeah, he just got access. It's almost like a making of. That was the kind of the feel I was going for. But it was really fun to be there, be at real locations. We're shooting in a courtyard of a building, and someone, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're making a film. The scene in Breathless where Belmondo does the apartments upstairs. Like, really? All these people live in there. It's like they didn't know film history happened where they walk every day. So yeah, it was fun.
It's one of those interesting things about the film. You say it's like a making of. I was thinking back to all the films that have been made about filmmaking.
Yeah.
And
It's a fun,
so many of
fun subgenre.
it is, but so many of them are angst-ridden.
Yeah.
Because of whether we're looking at 8.5 or less known films, it's the pain, the agony. This film is I mentioned the word joyous earlier, but it's a love letter
I'm
to
making it about someone else's film. When you're making it kind of about your own experience, I think it probably be pretty angsty, or that's what that's what leaves an impression on you. Is like, oh my God, I'm in a drama, psychodrama, while you're making your film. But it was fun to, instead of doing that, and I could have done that. I could have had a film. I think it lends toward comedy and drama, but it was fun to get into the history of another film and a time and a place, to just really obsess about that. So that was kind of a nice distance, but still to bring all your own experience. Like, this is very much to me about the making of my first film, and I say my first film, the one that I had a crew and people looking at me. I'd worked alone for a long time and even made a feature that way. But my first in Slacker, I had a crew of like 7 people. But it's a big deal all of a sudden. Everybody's wondering what you're doing. I didn't have a conventional script. I was doing it very unconventional, kind of pretty inspired by the Nouvelle Vague. So that notion, I think that's what this movie shows, is if you're going to do a different kind of film, it's okay to do it differently, and that just rubs the people around you who are just wondering what's going on. So
let's jump back a little bit to that period around Slacker. And you were one of the co-founders of the Austin Film Society. At that point, concurrent with that was the Heart of Texas Filmmakers. And it did strike me that it's not an exact parallel, but there is that comparison between the Nouvelle Vague and what you and all your friends and colleagues were attempting at that point in time in the mid-'80s.
Well, like I said, about community, it's wherever you make it. It's like, I think every filmmaker should have that community, or there's a little revolution going on, but it's very different. The Nouvelle Vague, it's like he's in conversation with Rossellini. Melville is watching his dailies and giving him advice. He's running into Robert Bresson on the street. Look who his friends are. They're all have made films. I didn't know anybody. When I was making my first film, I felt isolated, and yet excited, about the possibilities. So that was, it's just your friends. Everybody aspires to make films, even in the group. But I was the one with the, the idea, the script. I'd hustled some money, and
But I think part of the reason why Slacker is still now referred to by people and loved by so many people is the level of invention that you have in that film, of not coming up with a film that's just a linear indie drama.
And I felt like that feeling, and I related it, because again, an unconventional script, unconventional movie, the people working on it, you can't even describe it fully to them. Like, even the people working on it don't exactly know what you're doing, which is, but they're excited about the possibilities. So that's not a bad vibe to operate from. But you're really out on a limb when you don't have a conventional script and everything's normal. But it's fun too, so. But I was lucky. That community I had then, I still have. It's just bigger, it's much bigger, but it was kind of small then. I started this film site in '85, just wanted to watch a bunch of movies. And I actually programmed in spring of '88, I showed 17 Godard movies. Some of those were like attended by 3 people, myself and 2 other people wandered in. We lost a lot of money that spring, but I had a good education. I would watch each film 5 times. It was a great film cultural hub we created, and
So I want to come back to Slacker in a moment, but just go back a little further in time. I gather that you originally wanted to be a writer, a novelist.
Yeah, I thought that was all that was available to me. But as a kid, what do you know? You don't really know yourself very well. I wanted to express myself, I guess.
So,
and I was, you win the writer's fair and you think, oh, I'm a writer.
Well, you are a writer.
yeah. But it took me a while to find out, like, actually, by college age, I segued into theater. I was writing plays, and I thought, I just like the artistic troupe notion of actors. Suddenly my friends were actors, and theater department, and I was like, that was fun. I was That was my aspiration. But then I started that summer, I was 20, I started watching movies. There was an English professor at my college who hosted, and this is the early days of like, we're going to get together Thursday night and show a VHS of a, you could watch a movie, wow, on your own. Not in a theater even, just in a classroom. And, we would talk about it. He was like the first film buff I met. He knew that he could tell me about the director and the writer and the actors. I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. He seemed to know a lot about cinema. And so that's a little, contagious. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I found myself that next summer just going to movies, and it kind of something got in my head. Actually, when I was younger, I had shot movies with my cousin one summer when I was about 14, 15. Super 8, we edited, and I went, oh, film. I liked the physicality of it, and I'd studied photography a little bit. I knew my way around a dark room. I was good with photography, I guess. So, and I just liked the camera. But I was really busy with sports and other things. I kind of thought, oh, I might like to do that someday. So I think that was feeding in also. As I approached cinema, I was like, I think I want to write films, maybe direct. And then you see films, there's always those inspiring stories of people just generation or so older than you that made a film in their backyard. Kind of the indie thing was starting to be clear, And it's like, oh, you can just make a film and for low budget, and felt like writing a novel or something. It wasn't so, you didn't have to go join Hollywood. You could just make your own film. So once you have that in your head, then it feels really close. You don't feel like you need anybody else. You can just do it. So I like the freedom of that.
The reason I wanted to show that clip from Nouvelle Vague, there are a number of reasons. One, you mentioned the sandwiches, which I absolutely love, and the asking for money. The other, I don't know if it is a direct reference, but you'll see there's a scene, overhead shot of the car going down the street, and that just reminded me of the 400 Blows, the school teacher leading the children.
And they're all peeling off,
Peeling off.
Well, they shot off balconies. They didn't have any money for cranes or anything, so we were using the same language and techniques of them at that time. And a lot of balcony shots.
And the other reason I wanted to show that scene is because of all the things that Roberta Rossellini said, or the character of Roberta Rossellini says. One of them, true freedom is logic and does not care about rules and habits. And it struck me, as well as in a film is made in a state of urgency and necessity, that those two elements strike me as being absolutely everything about Slacker.
Yeah, or just, personal film or expression, and to me that they just represent freedom and personal expression. I think the Nouvelle Vague or Rossellini, they were looking for a new kind of film, and I admire it so much. I mean, he did that in the 40s. It's like, oh, films they're always in opposition to the commercial cinema of their country at the time, the bland stuff. They have their heroes, obviously, the films that inspire them. But just the general run-of-the-mill status quo is always to be rebelled against. And they did that with a certain ferocious, intent, which I think is healthy. But artists are just looking for freedom, and no constraints. And that's really what they're pushing for. And everybody finds that in their own way, So what do you need to be freed from, And so Nouvelle Vague's really seeing Godard, the one-man revolution that's going on with him, bringing his unique cinematic brain to cinema is pretty fascinating. Frustrating for Gene Seberg and those around him, but it is his own revolution. He does a lot of what Rossellini. He's giving him a lot of, the producer would say that's bad advice, to quit filming when your interest flags, because he walks off his own set. After 2 hours of filming, that freaks everybody out,
But it works.
It works. Ultimately, it works. Yeah.
So we're going to see some examples of your early work. I've grouped some clips together just because our guest has made too many bloody films. We would need about 10 hours to fit them all together.
Well,
So we're going to see 3 brief clips. The first is the opening dialogue from Slacker with your good self as the main character in the taxi cab. Look out for the most inexpressive performance by the taxi driver, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Then we're seeing...
He had a line right after I cut it out. I end the scene. He was pretty good though, but the scene was too long. But you're going to see my 28-year-old self.
Then we're going to see another scene in a car from Dazed and Confused, again playing with the idea of philosophy and asking about life. And then a truly profound moment from Everybody Wants Some that if you want to, I strongly recommend that you join in. So if we can see these clips, please.
That song goes on for a while. We could keep going.
Well, I just turned around, and what's really nice, that song, it never fails with an audience. You just see people going.
The first rap.
It's fantastic. I would say if everyone played Rapper's Delight first thing in the morning, the world would be a very, very fine, peaceful place.
There would be no wars.
No wars.
Yeah.
Not at all. And obviously, not very early, but an early-ish appearance by Glenn Powell.
Yeah,
sporting a very fine moustache.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, 1980 mustache.
I like what you just said to me with Slacker, the reference to the Omega Man, that when that film opened, it used to get a laugh.
Chuckles. This Charlton Heston film from the early 70s. Yeah, it's become more of an obscure title, but check it out. It's a really great movie.
It is.
One of those apocalyptic 70s, end of the world, Andromeda strain, we're all going to die movies.
And it kind of felt like Charlton Heston was the only person who was going to live into the future in all
That's what I thought it could very well be, between that and, Planet of the Apes. Charlton would be the only one.
Interesting that line about the Omega Man and this empty down landscape, that's what Austin feels like in that film.
It is. It's not that way anymore. But yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, I was kind of obsessed with like banality. Like you could make stories out of, even that dream he describes. It's like, there's nothing going on. I think Ethan in Before Sunrise, just while they're on the train, he talks about this show he has in mind of just filming kind of nothing but making it really long. I don't know, something. Better to talk about those films than to actually watch them. Like kind of like Andy Warhol's Empire or Sleep. Have you seen those? Yeah, 45 minutes is good to just stare at the Empire State Building. But
I did see.
I like conceptual things.
There's a documentary that's a conversation between you and James Benning.
Oh yeah.
And James is someone who likes duration. There's one film in which literally an hour and a half long digital film, all you see is nightfall on a forest. And I remember seeing him introduce the film.
Yeah.
And he encouraged people to fall asleep because the idea that when you wake up, you'll see a very different landscape.
Right, yeah.
Are we going to see that from you? The hour and a half single take film?
No, I don't think so. I do some real time movies. Like Blue Moon's more or less real time, but no, I'm not. Yeah. Leave that to James. He's a master.
Come to Dazed and Confused, your second commercial, let's say commercial feature, real movie. What I love about it is that it's neither an exercise in rose-tinted nostalgia, nor is it a conventional linear film that you would normally expect of that kind of high school film.
Yeah, I don't know how I got that one made, really. It sounded fun, like a bunch of teenagers, rock and roll movie. And the head of the studio was made at Universal. This is a different world, obviously, that Universal would give some punk who made an indie film $6 million to make his next film. But they liked the script and the idea. But even that clip you showed, it's like, I was injecting these kind of heady thoughts. When you're 17, it's sort of angst. It's kind of you feel things deeply. Like to put stuff like that into this rock and roll movie. That was kind of the challenge, to try to capture those teenage years. But I think they didn't really realize there wasn't really a story, for a while. It didn't until it was finished. An audience would like it, but then people would, it was weird. I felt like
And how long?
But it's just a pure character piece. You're hanging out with these people. That's where I think the genre I've been tagged with, named for me, is like the hangout movie. But I was like, well, that's life. That's cinema. Why can't cinema be that? It's like.
How long had you been thinking about that film?
Of Dazed? I started thinking about that while I was making Slacker. So 89, I had about 3 years of thinking about it. And sometimes, you get enough distance on your own life, and this is how I often work. It's like, oh yeah, what the hell was that? Those years, 10-year gap difference. Like, well, you start to see your life kind of metaphorically, and things mean more than what they were. Like, what did all that mean So it's a good thing to work with, artistically.
And
So I went back and got that music and started writing, and just, became this kind of fun comedy exercise. But and also kind of rebelling against the genre itself. Like, okay, I'm doing a genreless film with Slacker, but I was I'm doing it's a teen movie, and at that point, you had the John Hughes films, but the history of teen movies, starting with Rebel Without a Cause, that's like a post-war genre into itself. And I was kind of opposed, when you take on a genre and you go, well, I'm going to do my version. And in my case, it was like, well, the movies are so angsty. They're so like, there's always a, big story going on or drama, kind of all this fake drama. There's always a car wreck, or there's always some big life-changing thing going on. And I was really obsessed with just capturing one night. Like, I remember riding around with a friend of mine in his Le Mans all night, and we were having, my first idea for that film was to set it all in that car, like real time, just this one night riding around. You're interacting with people, there's almost fights, there's parties to go to, you're just driving around. Because we really drove around all night listening to ZZ Top's Fandango. And it was an 8-track, so it would stop mid-song sometime and click to the next song. I was like, get that kind of detail in there. But at the end of the night, we had never left the town at all, and we had driven like 138 miles or something. It was like, oh yeah. And then, there's weed and there's booze and there's fun, but it's like we didn't do anything. But I was like, it was kind of fun. I said, let's make a movie about that, So that was that was just too experimental. That was just too conceptual. I was like, oh no, let's actually go to the party. Let's see him at school. It just broadened. But the first idea can be I think it's good to have a strong emotional idea. So that still underlies the whole movie, is kind of that. But I started putting in more fun things like busting the mailboxes. And once you go into your own life, you can pull out all the fun things that ever happen.
Just
or the horrible things that ever happen.
Kind of knowing yourself over the years of making films, do you have a similar kind of modus operandi? Do you start with a scenario? Do you start with a character? Does it change with each project you work on?
A little bit with each project, but now the ones that kind of come from my own experience and stuff, it's really kind of similar. I work in a similar way. Just usually one big idea like that. And then I just take note cards and take notes for usually a year or two, or sometimes decades before I actually sit down and write a script.
So
something like that.
Everybody Wants Some came 2 years after Boyhood. And I don't know when you originally started coming up with the idea of Everybody Wants Some, but it does feel like you've got someone going off to college.
Yeah.
And then you're in college.
Yeah, one's a continuation of the other. Yeah, funny that way. I mean, Everybody Wants Some is kind of a sequel in a way to two movies. It's a spiritual sequel to Dazed. It's like linearly, it's like high school to college. And then it is also the guy leaving for college, and in Everybody Wants Some, he arrives. I just said, well, if the guy in Boyhood had some athletic talent and played on a college baseball team, that would, but it's going off to college. So it's developmentally, it's that.
And with regards to both Dazed and Everybody Wants Some, the casts are incredible, and it feels like, particularly Dazed, it feels like a sort of a Brat Pack moment of an entire new generation of actors. What was the casting like for both of those films?
Oh, it's so fun. You have to, casting to me is the most magical stage in a way. It's where you have these concepts of characters, dialogue on a page or the idea of a character. But when you meet the right person, it's like love at first sight. They come through the door. Or now, increasingly, you're watching them on videos because everybody home tapes. It used to be they had to come into the office or whatever. You just met everybody. Now you kind of scroll through a lot of people and then, okay, I want to meet this one, that one. So it's a little different. But it's the same feeling, though. You get, Nouvelle Vague was very specific casting. I'm casting people who not only look like who they're playing, these iconic people, but looking for that attitude, looking for that. You have to be brutally honest with yourself at casting. Like they are who you have in mind. And, you know, the John Hustons of the world talk about, you know, casting. If you get the cast right, that's 80% or whatever. You don't have to, you know, you'll spend more time with an actor who you've slightly miscast than many cast members put together, you know, if you're trying to get them to do something they don't really naturally want, isn't their inclination, so.
Another character who, when I watched Blue Moon, I thought, this is who I thought the New Yorker writer E.B. White was. Just the
Patrick Kennedy.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, a wonderful actor here. He lives here. I worked with him on Me and Orson Welles. And remembered him the years later. And it's like, oh yeah, Patrick would be perfect for that. So yeah, you get a little repertory theater in your head of people you've worked with or actors you've known. And it's great when there's someone you think would be perfect for a part.
Moving on to process, I remember seeing many years ago an interview with Matthew McConaughey talking about working with you on Dazed and Confused. I think it was around the time of the release of Bernie. And he spoke about the mixtapes that you handed out to actors. And then he said, I wasn't told who the character was. I was given a mixtape and work from there. Is that something you like to do with a lot of your films, of trying to find a way that suits each of the projects?
Yeah, like what can you do to help an actor? And in this case, it's a period film too, so they're trying to get with the spirit of that time that they don't remember or weren't around for. So yeah, I'd give them like, here's what your character's listening to. You know, here's your focus. Like you're kind of more metal, you're more fun, you know. Certain girls like, okay, you're into Joni Mitchell, you're into, you know, ABBA or whatever, you know, like you kind of, their taste, and, you know, you just try to help out any way you can and make it fun, you know. So I like to rehearse a lot and spend time with actors and just answer all questions and have fun, really, get to know them. And yeah, but I thought the music was particularly important for teenagers because to me, that was kind of, teenagers, you're not very articulate. Like the music is filling in all your emotional areas and all your kind of philosophical areas too. You think this is also deep and important. The lyrics to these songs and everything, you know, it's just so important. It's such an expressive element of your life. The music, you know, it's the how you communicate. Just even meeting someone, like, who are you listening to? Oh, okay, you bond. Go to concerts. It's just such a big element of teen life, as I remember.
I want to ask about a number of the films: Boyhood, Dazed and Confused, Everybody Wants Some, and the wonderful Apollo 10.5, which if you haven't seen, it's on Netflix. It's a gorgeous animated film. The other day, I watched the episode that you directed of the documentary series God Save Texas, which came out last year and is available on HBO and Now TV. And you have a discussion of your mother in that film, and I was quite surprised the parallels with Patricia Arquette's character in Boyhood.
Oh yeah.
Just across these films, and I know obviously you're the filmmaker, you're the creator, you're bringing yourself into these films, but how much over the years do you feel that you've drawn on your own biography?
Yeah, a lot. The episode you're talking, it's really a feature-length documentary. It was just there were 3 documentaries. It's called God Save Texas, but mine is called Hometown Prison. I grew up in this town in East Texas where the state prison is, which in Texas is a kind of a big deal, big prison system. And yeah, they kind of pulled that out of me, but it ends up kind of a Rosetta Stone. Like you see, here's where the Emporium was from that. Okay, here's where I went to college and high school in that same town. So yeah, it was so personal. And yeah, my mom taught at the college there, just like Patricia's character. Had a stepfather who's a prison guard. You know, so much I'm pulling from my life, pretty specifically autobiographical. So I'm one of the few who admits that. You know, when people say, "Oh, is it based on?" I'll go, "Yeah." I met a girl in Philadelphia one night. We walked around all night, and I thought I'd make a movie about that. You know, you're supposed to. It doesn't make you seem less creative. Like you can't just pull things out of your just head just naturally. But I think everybody does that. You know, it's all, even if it's not. You know, I always heard Truffaut. He worked with these co-writers sometimes, and I think you can make a personal film and be kind of autobiography like adjacent, like something like that. Every filmmaker's it's all personal. You relate to it even if it didn't happen to you specifically. Truffaut was obsessed that it happened to somebody. You know, he would get stories like, okay, that really happened in the world. Okay, that can be in the movie. But he wasn't obsessed with it having happened to him, just that it happened to somebody. You know, like it was from the real world.
Yeah.
That I always thought that's kind of an interesting approach. You know, so you get stories from people. Well, like a writer's mind, you're just taking in the whole world. You got to kind of sponge everything. Like Everybody Wants Some is like the kind of the initiation ritual when they tape them to the fence upside down and they're hitting balls at them. You know, so did that happen to you? It's like, no, that happened to a friend of mine at his school in Louisiana. They did that. So, you know, you're just pulling things from everywhere. So, but yeah, I don't mind. I was really afraid for my mom to watch Boyhood, actually. And I was like, gosh, how's she going to respond? And because it was her, you know, It was those marriages and her career. And she didn't seem to see it. She's like, oh, I remember, yeah, we moved and I'd say, oh, there's going to be a pool at the apartment complex. She just thought it was lovely. She didn't have it. She didn't see it as a, I was like, oh, wow, okay. Those awful stepfathers, no problem. Okay. My sisters say, yeah, we went to therapy. You made a movie. You know?
Also, from your mum's perspective, she's probably watching that film going, yeah, Patricia Arquette's playing me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. I think so.
You mentioned about spending a night walking around with someone. We're going to move on to another batch of 3 clips. And it actually comes back to another line that Rossellini says in Nouvelle Vague. The camera is the ballpoint pen and imbecile. It's worth nothing if you have nothing to say. So we're going to see the first encounter between Jesse and Celine in Before Sunrise. Oh. Then another encounter between Jesse and Celine in 2001's Waking Life. And then we're jumping on to the final scene. Hopefully you've all seen it. The final scene of Boyhood from 2014. So can we see these clips, please?
I'm always reminded to digress a little here. That after, you know, when you make a movie, even on the day, it's like, oh, this is the last shot of the day. It's like, oh, that's kind of big. And then the last shot of the movie, you know, 30, 40 days of production, it's like, oh, it's the last shot of the whole movie. Well, you can imagine after 12 years of shooting, this is the last shot. And it was real time. The very end of the movie was the last thing, very true to that movie. While the sun was still out, you know, we had worked on the dolly move, we had rehearsed it, the scene, and then the light got right, and we did about 7 takes. But it was when Vince, the AD, said, okay, this is the martini. I could just feel the crew kind of go, whoa. But then it wasn't like we had to get it, you know. They had to hit them. I don't know. I'll just never forget that feeling. It was so, like, the buildup of those years was all in that one shot.
And that final moment, it just when Ella Coltrane looks up and that smile, and I just remember thinking, it's going to be all right.
Yeah, it's going to be all right. And I like even the way, this is the kind of happenstance, his eyes kind of flash the camera barely, you know? Yeah. He's just kind of like, oh, you're not supposed to do that? But I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. You know, like I had 7 takes to pick from. I like that one because he does that.
I wanted to include just the opening line of the Deep Blue by Arcade Fire here in My Place and Time. It strikes me that opening line, in some ways, is the very definition of so many of your films, the way you play with time, structure and form. And just if we look at the first 2 clips, you have this standalone film, and then a couple of years later, we return to them just in one scene in Waking Life.
Yeah, I remember calling Ethan and Julie and say, hey, I'm doing this weird animated film. It's kind of this cinematic dream practically. But I have this idea that we just float in on you guys in character, but you're kind of, in that scene, they kind of take the other character's position from something they said in years before. And they're like, okay. And even Julie's like, what are we doing here? You know, what do we do? But we had those couple days to work together, and we worked on that scene. And then that's when we decided, you know, that scene's important. But it was like, yeah, we should do this. We'd been talking about another movie. It made us think, oh, that wasn't just lightning striking in Vienna in summer '94. It's like, it's 5 years later. And yeah, I think Jesse and Celine have more to say. And it's a new phase of life. Their lives were changing. It's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
And was it easier having the creative team of you and the 2 of them sort of working on the development?
That's where we decided that that there was something between the 3 of us that we should it wasn't just, yeah, and let's all start now. You know, but it was still several years before it was 3 full years after that before we were shooting. 4 full years, but it did bring us back together in that regard. So.
And then you jump forward in time again to Before Midnight, and I'd read somewhere, I can't remember where, that was quite tough.
Oh yeah, well, it's just that a night of falling in love or a late afternoon of reuniting is pretty romantic. It's pretty heightened. Our idea for the third one, here they're now in their early 40s, and we all felt it, you know, as parents, and you know, we kind of wanted to take on the domestic. You know, we even had some weird ideas on that one. It's like, oh, what if half the movie is, oh, he's picking up the kids from school and you're working, you know, like to really get it. We was like, okay, that's just depressing. So let's at least let's at least put him on vacation. Like I had the idea of like every thing we want to say, we can say, but in an environment of, you know, so we put him in Greece, kind of in this paradisical situation, lovely. And that's even more tough because they got everything they want. They kind of got everything those characters wanted 9 years earlier. But be careful what you wish for. You know, you're still a human being. You're still having to exist in relation to someone else and your own life and the world. And, you know, so it was kind of a tough movie about like what's becoming a long-term relationship and just, you know, help.
So in terms of,
yeah.
in
it
real
was just
time,
harder to make. It's
Yeah.
less fun, you know? We have a 30-minute fight scene. It's not really a fight scene. I always tell them it's a love scene. You just got to say one more thing. You know, you got to have the final word, and then everything will be great. But if each character is doing that,
that relationship in real time has now spanned 35 years. You have Boyhood, which spans a period of 12 years, and you have an upcoming Stephen Sondheim adaptation, Merrily We Roll Along, with Paul Mescal, which I think has 17 of its 20 years left to run.
Well, it's 9 sections over 20 years,
Right?
And we filmed 3 of them. So we're a third of the way through, material-wise, but not quite time-wise.
What appeals to you about this play with real time?
Well, it's really just storytelling. It's not like I don't start with the form or anything. It starts with the characters and the story. Like, what will the cinematic reality be for the audience? You know, like that's what, you know, I'd seen some movies, I think that motivated me on Boyhood, where it was a guy who was like about 13, and it's a year later, and he's with a girl who's older. Everybody's suddenly bigger than him, but he's playing older. I was like, oh, I love this movie, but that's just not. Yeah. I was like, too bad you can't get someone to. We're just stuck. You're stuck in a growing person. Like childhood movies are really like 400 Blows. They're really about short amounts of time because you can't ask a 7-year-old, okay, now you're 9, now you're 11. You can recast, but that only works if there's been a time jump. So there's a limitation to the reality of that. So I was giving up on this childhood movie I was trying to write about growing up. The movie wasn't working in my head until I had that idea. You know, I was like, oh, I just saw a finished film. Like, oh yeah, you could just, yeah, that'd be cool, you know. But I was solving a problem. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about narrative and storytelling, and, you know, so that popped into my head. But that becomes kind of the proof of concept of the Sondheim musical that takes place over 20 years. And the reason it's initially didn't work, I think they felt they cast the actors too young, and then they're just playing dress up in their 40s, and you have these 21-year-olds looking, and people just don't believe it, even on the stage, where the disbelief would probably be a better chance. And so it was always seen as kind of maybe a problem with that play. That play has since gotten a lot better. They've worked on it. They've worked on it for years, and there's been a good production that originated here, and it's been a big deal in the U.S. But it's still the same fundamental. You know, you've got actors. get older actors to play younger, whatever. It's just solving, to me, it's solving a storytelling problem.
I want to come back to Boyhood. I know, actually, I genuinely know a few people in the audience for whom that film had an indelible impact. Were you surprised not by the film's success? It's a superb film, and I'm sure many
Which I
people
was
around
surprised
you.
by. But,
Really? Well, yes, I'm sure while you were putting it together, but when you see the final thing.
Why wouldn't you be?
But were you surprised by the incredible reaction that people had to the film as it sort of started to play in different countries?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you throw anything out in the world, I think we're all trying to connect, especially in things like films, plays, anything. Any artist who's putting something out there, I think you're sending it out into the world, wanting to connect in whatever way. My fear on Boyhood, it wasn't a fear. I had this conviction that it wasn't going to be, I had this incredible 12-year canvas that I had created, but it was like, at some point, if I ever had any doubts making it, it's like, am I blowing this opportunity? I'm making it about so little details of a life. I'm not hitting the high points. It's kind of banal. What I'm choosing every year is just like memories I had of that year and developmental stuff. And it wasn't the high points. We don't show a lot of that. We don't show the first kiss. It's just a year later, and so am I missing, is this going to mean anything to anybody? Have I missed but I had a conviction early on conceptually, like, no, I think there'll be an accumulative effect. That's all I could feel. Like, time in film is your friend. It's a powerful agent of, connection. And I thought it would be a really intimate connection with that family, and what they all go through. So, how life just goes by, and, people change and stay the same, all that. So, I don't know. It was great, though, when people did relate to it. But it was kind of like the same way people like, I like that movie Dazed and Confused. It's like, yeah, we used to do that. And I was like, yeah, you grew up. You went to high school. You partied. We're all not that different. And Boyhood, the same connection was like, yeah, my kid went off to college. It's like, yeah, all kids go off to college. Yeah, that's what it's about. Like, people going, yeah, I grew up, I left my parents when I did that. It's like, yeah, we're humans. There's a commonality to our lives. That if that hit an emotional connection to it, but all I was doing was trying to put it out there in some form that maybe you could relate to, but I'm not. So on one hand, I'm not surprised because of that, but I'm still, maybe surprised the film work that they would even go and watch it,
I want to move on to performance, and something that might also be a universal factor for people, the imposter syndrome. In the case of this film, it's not a syndrome. Someone is actually an imposter playing a school teacher. This clip just goes without saying. Let's see the clip. Every time I watch that, I always think a lesser director would have had cutaways to the reactions of each of the members of the class. He says, you do this, you do this. You just have one single shot pulling out.
Jack was like, what are you doing? Like, it's going to be one. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be one slow pullback. He's like, even when he watched a rough cut, he's like, are you sure? Like, it was just too much for him. I was like, no, it's perfect. It puts the audience in the elementary school seat, It's like...
So Jack's been...
And Jack could pull that off, too, like most performers can. He's incredible, There's one Jack Black.
So after this, he was in Bernie and then was the narrator in Apollo 10 and a Half. Oh. You've got Matthew McConaughey has appeared in 2 of your films. Glenn Powell...
Or 3.
3, sorry.
Yeah, Newton Boys.
Yes, Newton Boys, sorry. And Glenn Powell's, I believe, in 4.
Yeah, 2 bigger parts and 2 kind of...
Julie 4 and Ethan Hawke, I think it's 9 counting.
Yeah.
What is it
it's so funny seeing young Ethan in the Before clip. It was like, oh, wow. I remember we've had to talk about it because we have a movie here and people are like, oh, you guys have been working together 30 years. What's your relation? It's like we have to talk about that a lot. And someone mentioned that they like that the old couple on the train, it starts with that fight there, and they call them an old couple. And it's like, yeah, they're about like 40. Yeah. Like the idea that they've become the old couple. Whatever. But what were you talking?
Just the of working with actors time and again, and you've also worked with screenwriters as well.
Oh, yeah.
Time and again.
Always.
And never in the same way. Like if anyone has seen Bernie, or if you want to watch Bernie, it's a completely different Jack Black performance.
Oh yeah, that one got really crap distribution everywhere. It's such a fun movie.
Yeah.
It's like Bernie. That's the thing in the indie world. You can just be, through no fault of the film or your own, just the economics of the world can change. The film world can be very volatile. And you can start things without a sure path and hope for the best. But we're all, that film's, Jack is amazing in that film. He plays this little small town funeral director. I don't know, it's very funny.
Is there something of just
based on a true story, too.
turning up on set and knowing that you've got these people, that they're dependable, and all the other cast members around you?
Yeah, and by the time we turn up on set, we've rehearsed a lot, we've worked through everything, so it's always kind of, I want the set to be fun, it's like game day, but you're well prepared. I think some sets can be pretty angsty if you're having discussions about what you're doing. And I want to be having discussions about the fine tuning of maybe a new little idea or something special can be happening. But I
want to come on to the long-term relationship you've had with Ethan Hawke. I found this quote. It was at the Sundance Film Festival press conference for Before Sunrise that Ethan Hawke said of the film, "You only get that opportunity once in a blue moon," which is quite possibly the cheesiest intro to the film Blue Moon.
Wait, what year did you say that?
He said that with Before Sunrise.
Oh, way back in '95.
Yeah, so
okay.
it was written
I'll
in
tell him
stone
he said
at that point in time. I know we're going to open the floor to questions, but I do want to have a quick conversation about Ethan. But we've got a very, very short clip from Blue Moon, so perhaps we can see that first, and then we'll chat about it. If you can show the clip, please. It's an extraordinary film, and it's you spinning on a sixpence with this chamber drama, and yet you explode the space within this bar. But at its heart, playing Lawrence Hart, over the course of one evening, you have Ethan Hawke. It's absolutely extraordinary performance, and it struck me that you have to be really trusting in your director to come out and do something like that.
We realized we hadn't worked together. We hadn't really rolled camera in 10 years since the end of Boyhood. But we were developing this all these years, and some other things we're doing. We're friends, obviously. But it's like, but it was cool that we came back with this because it was such a challenge. It was like Ethan had to transform. He's 5 feet tall. He's bald with the comb over. He's just, everything about him had to change, especially his, I don't know, I called it like a kind of an erasure of Ethan. All Larry Hart is, his character, he's just the most brilliant lyricist ever, but he's just verbal. That's his gift. He's very sharp, but all he is a brain, a wit, a mouth, but his body is, not his instrument, His sexuality is not on the table, but Ethan, every gesture of Ethan, everything he did had to kind of go away. So I was a really naggy director. I mean, he said, like, if he didn't know me so well and know I was there for him, he would have punched me, because it was like, I was like, Ethan, stop, that, I was just taking away all his, like, whatever, uber masculine gestures, confidence, everything had to just go away. I was like, you're a little too sure of yourself. Like, you would never do that. So it was reductive. Usually you're building something. You start with the ideas and who they are, and you're adding in a great way. This was taking away everything, leaving him kind of just this open wound, of a guy on this particular night too. So that was the idea. But we were really rallying around the material, this script that we'd been developing with Robert Kaplow, who wrote the book, Me and Orson Welles. So we go back to then, that Holly and Vince had adapted, that I worked with. These are longtime colleagues. That's the great thing about this industry, is these long-term artistic relationships you can have. And so Robert had this just wicked script. It was just this, the it was like very musical, very lyrical. It was like a song, like a Rodgers and Hart song, in a way. So very dense.
It felt
So
like
it was just a challenge to pull off. So
it felt like sort of outtakes from the Algonquin group. I was expecting
Yeah.
Dorothy Parker to walk
yeah,
into
it
the
could
bar.
be. It could be. Yeah, the wit and intelligence of that era, we wanted to be into the film. And it's a physical challenge too. We had like 15 days to shoot it and no money and all that. But everybody gave it their best. They're all. My intrepid producer's here somewhere. John Sloss is here. I don't know if Shane Kelly's here, my DP, but anyway. Yeah. So anyway. There is Shane. So yeah, these challenges. But you get the team together and you do it. Everybody agrees on what the goals of the project are and how it should look and feel, and it's great when everybody is operating at a really high level. It demands it. You see actors pick each other up. Andrew Scott, just exquisite actor, so talented. But he comes into Ethan My World, and we're going. We're already been at this for a while, so I can feel him like, oh, but he loved it. He's like, oh, we're rehearsing a lot. Let's spend the time. Let's do it. These guys with theater backgrounds and Margaret Qualley worked so hard. Yeah, it's great. It feels like, since I have a sports background, I always go back to the sports metaphor, but it's really a good feeling when the team got together in spring training and had a goal to win the championship or whatever, and you work really hard to get there. And in our case, the arts aren't competitive. If you just feel like you made the best film you could make, that's all you're really trying to do. So,
I think we've got time for a couple of questions. So we've got someone down here.
Well, you say you couldn't make it today. Why couldn't you make it today? I mean, anyone can make a film. It's even cheaper than when I did that for like $23,000. It's even easier now. It's a great time to be a filmmaker. I think you can do anything. You just have to, the bigger challenge is having that film seen at the end of the day. That's more challenging. I think the exhibition culture, I think that's changed. It's harder to get your film seen, but you're not prohibited from doing it. I mean, more films are made now than ever, so there's really no excuses. You got to just, but yeah, I don't know. I think that film could be made easily. Yeah, I think I responded to the Philip K. Dick novel knowing it was his most personal book. That thing I was talking earlier about Truffaut, like, oh, this was real. And I talked to his daughter, and at the end it has that dedication, all those names. She goes, just so you know, here's my mother and here's my father. They're both on that list of kind of the casualties of that era. So it was in personal territory for sure. And I just wanted to be authentic to that story, not just take the idea and do something else, but actually tell that story. So that was the goal with that movie. That's a dark movie. It's got its exuberance and it was fun, but that was a wonderful cast. I don't know, great experience. Kind of an experiment, take that animation technique up a notch. But yeah, wonderful time.
Just staying with Scanner Darkly, we also, that I've mentioned Apollo 10.5, the appeal of animation and rotoscope.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed. I like the form, especially when it's something that's kind of otherworldly. If you're a dreamscape or in that case, a kind of a drug-induced paranoid state, like this other thing where it's kind of questioning the reality. I'm kind of obsessed with like how we do process dreams and thoughts, and that it's real, but it's not real. So I'm always looking for the form to that. And I'd had the idea of Waking Life for years, this idea, but it didn't work in my head, but I saw this technique some friends of mine were developing. It was like a computer variant of the ancient process of rotoscoping, but it was a computer and it was kind of indie. I said, well, God, maybe we could use that for this film I've been thinking of. That's the way it should look. The form equals content idea. Finally the film in my head worked if it looked like that. It would be boring, pretentious, all these other things if it was live action, but it worked like that. And I felt the same way about Scanner a little bit. And then years later on Apollo, similar thing. It's a memory film and a fantasy film kind of mashed up. So that felt like the right form for that. And we had developed that animation a lot. It's much less rotoscoping. It was more traditional 3D animation. So I don't know. There's always the visual challenge of that. But that was as personal a film as I've ever made. You know, about a childhood, kind of a childhood memoir of a movie. Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, you would think, I did remember certain songs from certain eras, but I did something I'd never done before. I'd never really had to do. But as I got toward the end of that movie, I mean, the final song there, that Arcade Fire, that album, The Suburbs, really informed the last part of that movie. I got to tell the Butler brothers that in person once. I was like, hey, can we use your song? It means so much to us. And they're like, oh, okay. But I asked these people who were kind of the age of the characters growing up, both of the kids, because actually Eller and Lorelei, the two kids, weren't much help. Their taste was so advanced and so different. Like, what are you listening to? And Lorelei's, well, I'm listening to medieval, like, harp music. And Eller is like, his taste when I first met him as a 6-year-old, he's listening to Rage Against the Machine. And, his taste was so far beyond. We had to normalize those kids a lot. I knew we'd sort of catch up as we went. So they weren't really much help. So I got all these other kids we went through the years, and I would say, hey, what were the songs of that summer? I would pick a date, and they'd say, and so they were saying, everybody was listening to this song. This was really popular. And some of them I had heard, but a lot I hadn't. But everyone thought this, I thought it sucked, but everybody else liked it. That was kind of the common thing for all the popular music, because, everybody's so cool. But yeah, so I kind of did it was like a poll or something, but from kids, it had to come out of their own lives. It's like, yeah, I was at a party and this was playing all night. So that meant something to me. And then I had to like the song too. There was a lot to pick from. But, and then there's some greatest hits in there too, when you get to like the parents' taste. But the specific ones that I think was from that year and those kids were, again, it's funny in this talk, I've come back to that 3 times. Like I needed that song to resonate with them for some reason or another. So,
well, in your true style, we'll probably be playing this interview on a loop for years now, returning to it. Unfortunately, I have got a signal that we do actually have to stop because we have another screening taking place in here. Blue Moon opens in the UK on the 17th of November, and Nouvelle Vague opens on the 30th of January next year. I'd also strongly recommend the Dazed and Confused and Slacker Criterion releases, which have a wealth of material. Thank you to My Clear Text for the live captioning. Also, thank you to Julie and Chris.
And thank you, guys.
Thank you to the BFI, but most of all, Richard Linklater.
Thank you, Ian. Oh, thank you. Amazing.